All right, welcome back, guys. Today we are going to go over Seneca's letter to Lucilius, letter 21. This is on the renown which my writings will bring you, and let's jump right into it here. All right, he says here in verse 1, do you conclude that you are having difficulties with those men about whom you wrote me? Your greatest difficulty is with yourself, for you are your own stumbling block. You do not know what you want. You are better at approving the right course than following it out. You see where the true happiness lies, but you have not the courage to attain it. Let me tell you what it is that hinders you, inasmuch as you do not yourself discern it. Okay, so this letter is kind of the first one that we've seen that is a bit of a rebuke. Okay, it's not entirely a rebuke, but he's saying here that, look, he apparently Lucilius is writing about some men that are that he's having difficulties with, and Seneca is telling him the problem is actually with yourself. Okay, you're the one. You're your own stumbling block. You don't know what you want, and he's saying that you're better at approving the right course, so at figuring out the right thing, talking about the right thing, than actually following it out. And he knows where true happiness lies, but he doesn't have the courage to attain it. All right. So let's go on, and he'll tell us why this is the case. You think that this condition, which you are to abandon, is one of importance, and after resolving upon that ideal state of calm into which you hope to pass, you're held back by the luster of your present life, from which it is your intention to depart, just as if you're about to fall into a state of filth and darkness. Okay. So he's saying here that, again, remember, Lucilius is a person that was in some high government positions. So he's saying that you think that this condition, okay, which you're going to abandon, is one of importance, right? So he's saying it's not. You're thinking that it is. And after resolving upon that ideal state of calm in which you hope to pass, you're held back by the luster of your present life, which is what he talked about in some of the other letters, right? It's like you want this life of peace, of this philosopher life, yet you don't want to give up this other thing, okay? And he says, from which it is your intention to depart, just as if it were to fall into a state of filth and darkness. So he's saying you're saying that you want to do this, but I'm not seeing you do it, and this is the problem, all right? In verse 2, he says, this is a mistake, Lucilius. To go from your present life into the other is a promotion. There is the same difference between these two lives as there is between mere brightness and real light. The latter has a definite source within itself. The other borrows its radiance. The one is called forth by an illumination coming from the outside, and anyone who stands between the source and the object immediately turns the latter into a dense shadow, but the other has a glow that comes from within. So again, he's comparing these two lives, right? He's saying, look, if you get out of this life that you're in that you think is so good, it's actually going to be promotion. It's actually better. All right. And he's saying the differences between these two lives that you could be living is between just something that's bright and the real light, right? So, a real light is a definite source, okay? The other borrows the radiance, right? So what he's saying is that this other choice, this other life of going into seclusion more so, being a philosopher, retiring, as you will, is where your actual value is. All right, and he says here, it is your own studies that will make you shine and render you eminent. Allow me to mention the case of Epicurus. Okay, so in verse 3, he says, he was writing to Idomeneus and trying to recall him from a showy existence to sure and steadfast renown. Idomeneus was at the time a minister of state who exercised a rigorous authority and had important affairs in hand. If, said Epicurus, you're attracted by fame, my letters will make you more renowned than all the things which you cherish and which make you cherished. Okay, so again, what he's saying here, if we break this down, he said here that it's your own studies that will make you shine and render you eminent. Okay, and so he's saying that this is why this life is better. It's because it is the thing that you're studying, the philosophy, not this position that you hold, that's going to actually make you valuable. And Epicurus was saying a similar thing. He was writing to a different guy, right? And he said this. He said, if you're attracted by fame, my letters will make you more renowned than all the things which you cherish and make you cherish. And in actuality, look how true this is, because he's mentioned here in Seneca's letters to Lucilius, and how many years later is it? Many years later, right? Thousands of years later, right? He's still being mentioned. Okay, so yeah, maybe he's not superbly famous, but he is here. Many people have read this. Whereas how many other people and how many other political positions do people hold that no one knows who they are anymore, right? So in verse 4, he says, "Did Epicurus speak falsely? Who would have known that Idomeneus had not the philosopher thus engraved a name in those letters of his? All the grandees and satraps, even the king himself, who was petitioned for the title which Idomeneus sought, are sunk in deep oblivion. Cicero's letters keep the name of Atticus from perishing. It would have profited Atticus nothing to have Agrippa for a son-in-law, a Tiberius for the husband of his granddaughter, and Drusus Caesar for a great-grandson. Amid these mighty names, his name would never be spoken, had not Cicero bound him to himself." Okay, so this is a little confusing, but it's basically what we were just saying, right? He's saying that, look, did Epicurus speak falsely? No, it was actually true, because we are speaking the name now of Idomeneus, and no one would have known his name if the philosopher Epicurus, in this case, hadn't written about him, right? And so he's saying that at the time, this guy Idomeneus, he was trying to position for all these titles, right? All the grandees and satraps, even the king himself, who was positioned for the title which Idomeneus sought, are sunk into deep oblivion. So all these people that actually were in higher positions, no one knows who they are, okay? But we know who he is, right? And the same of Atticus, who Cicero had written about. And so what he's really saying here is that, the philosopher, the philosopher, because philosophy is going to, like, true wisdom is going to outlive all these other things, because true wisdom, like that's why we're doing this YouTube channel here. This video is about these things, because these things are extremely valuable. They last thousands of years. So if you really, really want to be famous, right, be a philosopher or be talked about by a philosopher, right? That's really the thing. So that's why he's saying that the study of philosophy is actually way more valuable, because it goes beyond yourself. It's like the things that are happening now, and you can apply this to your life in the sense that, the job you're working, is it really, it seems really important. And maybe a title or position might seem really important, but what things are more important than that? The things that will last, what does it matter if this company produces this widget and you help them produce this widget? In the long run, no one cares and no one is going to know your name, and those things, that company will disappear. But if you create some great work, let's say you write a book, let's say you create something of value, that could outlast that. And that's truly the more valuable thing. He says here, in verse 5, "The deep flood of time will roll over us. Some few great men will raise their heads above it, and, though destined at last to depart into the same realms of silence, will battle against oblivion and maintain their ground for long. That which Epicurus could promise his friend, I promise you, Lucilius. I shall find favor among later generations. I can take with me names that will endure as long as mine. O poet Virgil promised an eternal name to two heroes and is keeping his promise. Blessed heroes twain, if power my song possess, the record of your names shall never be erased from the book of time, while yet Aeneas' tribe shall keep the capital, that rock immovable, and Roman sire shall empire hold." So it's so funny, because Seneca actually predicted this. He predicted that, and he was correct, right? Lucilius is famous because of Seneca. So that's pretty amazing, right? and Seneca knew that he was going to become famous because of what he was writing, right? And so it just goes to prove the point. And then he uses this poem from Virgil to show that this is true. All right. So in verse 6, he says, "Whenever men have been thrust forward by fortune, whenever they have become part and parcel of another's influence, they have found abundant favor. Their houses have been thronged only so long as they themselves have kept their position. When they themselves have left it, they have slipped at once from the memory of men. But in the case of innate ability, the respect in which it is held increases, and not only does honor accrue to the man himself, but whatever has attached itself to his memory is passed on from one another." So he's saying that, these titles that you can have, they're not valuable, right? Instead, it's the actual talent. It's the actual thing that you have done, right? Think about great artists and great writers and musicians and how their name lives on. But think about people who have held positions. Like, who knows who's the CEO of whatever company. In many years, it will disappear and no one will really care or really know, right? It doesn't matter. Those positions don't matter as much as the person who has actually created something of value, right? And he says in verse 7, "In order that Idomeneus may not be introduced free of charge in my letter, he shall make up the indebtedness from his own account. It was to him that Epicurus addressed the well-known saying, urging him to make Pythoculus rich, but not rich in the vulgar and equivocal way. If you wish, he said, to make Pythoculus rich, do not add to his store of money, but subtract from his desires. So again, we hear this common theme. Not adding to money, but instead subtracting from desires. Subtracting from desires is actually what will make you rich. So let's see what his breakdown is. He says in verse 8, this idea is too clear to need an explanation and too clever to need reinforcement. There is, however, one point on which I would warn you, not to consider that this statement applies only to riches. Its value will be the same no matter how you apply it. If you wish to make Pythoculus honorable, do not add to his honors, but subtract from his desires. If you wish to make Pythoculus to have pleasure forever, do not add to his pleasures, but subtract from his desires. If you wish to make Pythoculus an old man, filling his life to the full, do not add to his years, but subtract from his desires. Right? So he's really doubling down on this point, and this is, something that you should really get from Stoic philosophy if you're listening to these letters, which is this idea that you need to reduce your desires. If you want more, you will be happier. I mean, if you want less, you will be happier. Because you don't really need all that much, right? As he says in other letters, the needs of nature are very small. So, the answer is not to get more. It's actually to desire less, to be happy with less, to be content with less. In verse 9, he says, there's no reason why you should hold that these words belong to Epicurus alone. They are public property. I think we ought to do in philosophy as they are wont to do in the Senate. When someone has made a motion of which I am to approve to a certain extent, I asked him to make his motion in two parts, and I vote for the part which I approve. So I am all the more glad to repeat the distinguished words of Epicurus in order that I may prove to those who have recourse to him through bad motive, thinking that they will have in him a screen for their own vices, and they must live honorably no matter what school they follow. Okay, so what he's basically saying here is he's saying, look, let's do like they do in the Senate. When we've got something that we don't quite agree 100% with, let's break it into parts, and then we'll vote on those parts. And so he's saying, he's going to go ahead and repeat the words of Epicurus, just so that the people that don't like him, right, and believe in the Stoic school of philosophy, not the Epicurean school of philosophy, that they still keep the wisdom of it. Just because you don't like the man, he's preserving the words, the wisdom of it, which is quite intelligent, right? And he says here in verse 10, go to his garden and read the motto carved there. Stranger, here you will do well to tarry. Here our highest good is pleasure. The caretaker of that abode and kindly host will be ready for you. He will welcome you with barley meal and serve you water also in abundance with these words. Have you not been well entertained? This garden, he says, does not whet your appetite. It quenches it, nor does it make you more thirsty with every drink. It slakes the thirst by a natural cure, a cure that demands no fee. This is the pleasure in which I have grown old. Okay, so the trick here is Epicureans are known for pleasure. And it says here, our highest good is pleasure. But what's actually happening here, right? He's saying that we'll welcome you with barley meal. That's not a very elegant dish, okay? And serve you water in abundance, not wine, water, right? And then with these words, have you not been well entertained? It doesn't whet your appetite, it quenches it. So what he's saying is that what he's been saying all along, and Epicurus is actually saying the same thing, even though he's known for the opposite, which is that actually to increase your pleasure, it is to remove your desires. It is to not to have more, but to want less. In verse 11, he says here, in speaking with you, however, I refer to those desires which refuse alleviation, which must be bribed to cease. For in regard to the exceptional desires which may be postponed, which may be chastened and checked, I have this one thought to share with you. A pleasure of that sort is according to our nature, but is not according to our needs. One owes nothing to it. Whatever is expended upon it is a free gift. The belly will not listen to advice. It makes demands. It importunes, and yet it is not a troublesome creditor. You can send it away at a small cost, provided only that you give it what you owe, not merely all you're able to give. Farewell. Okay, so breaking down this last part here, what is he saying? Okay, so this one's a little bit hard. In speaking with you, however, I refer to those desires which refuse alleviation. Okay, so he's saying that what are the desires that you actually can't just get rid of? Okay, they have to be bribed to cease. Okay. So For in regard to the exceptional desires, which may be postponed, which may be chastened and checked, I have this one thought to share with you. Okay, so talking about these kind of desires, here's what I would say. All right, a pleasure of that sort is according to our nature, but is not according to our needs. Okay, so one owes nothing to it. So he's saying again when he says needs, right? It's according to our nature. So there are some things that we do need, all right, and there are some pleasures that we do need, right? And he's saying whatever is expended upon it is a free gift. So it's not that you need these things, right? It's just the basic stuff. And he's saying here, for example, hunger, right? The belly won't listen to advice. It makes demands. Okay, you have to feel the belly. You cannot just be like, all right, remove your desire for food. Okay, but he says that you could just send it away at a small cost. You only have to give it a small amount, what you owe. You don't have to give it everything that you have, right? Like every other desire in life, or most other desires in life. And that's the point that he's making. He's saying, there are some of these things that you do have to take care of, the basic needs of the body, of nature, right? But those things, it's a small cost, which again, this is a very recurring theme here. So, all right, that is it for today. We'll see you tomorrow.